Mr. Flynt, first of all, I want to tell you it's a genuine honor to speak to you. I've always considered you a champion of free speech. It's something I hold to be the absolute American value, the one American value, the idea to speak your mind and just to think freely. So before we talk about like the big issues, I just have to tell you, walking in here really, really surprised me. This is not what I expected. I saw portraits outside. I saw a lovely picture of Jesus and Mary and Joseph and angels in the clouds. I saw a number of pictures from what looked like the court of Vienna. I'm pretty sure I saw Franz Joseph in one of those pictures there. And right behind me here is a reproduction, I hope it's a reproduction, of The Storm by Pierre Cot, which is probably the most romantic picture of two people ever painted. I think most people would be absolutely surprised to know that you had such a classical romantic appreciation of art and the elegance of the women portrayed.
I got a very deep appreciation for Victorian art, and especially art from the biblical area. I like it as well.
Is there something about this classical view of the West that is a big part of you? I certainly don't want to start off this interview by insulting you, but this is maybe the most conservative office I've ever seen. It's a tremendously classical office. The entire floor is remarkably classical.
My taste really, in a way, is very much provincial when you compare it to a lot of the lavish digs that I've seen. When I first got through doing the offices here, I thought I might have overdone it. So it looked a little bit like a brothel. But I got used to it, and everybody thinks it's beautiful, and they like it, so it's fine.
Do you think most people would be surprised at the softness and the romance of the way that everything, and especially women, are portrayed in here? When they take a look at the magazines you do, you're often portrayed as a terrible misogynist, but certainly this office, you don't strike me that way.
Most people think that I'm the CDO guy in the basement of a building grinding out pornography every day, but they don't realize that I go to work.
All of the artwork, all of the taste in this entire floor, not just in the office, is, as I said, it's extremely classical. It's a classical Western view of the world. It's classical Western art. And a lot of Western values are under assault today. There's primarily the assault on free speech, which is coming in from everywhere. And you and your work at Hustler and everything else, have been a champion of free speech. So I'd like to start by talking about some of these assaults. You made a profound statement about the Charlie Hebdo attack, where a bunch of Muslim terrorists walked into a French magazine, shot up 13 people, killed 13 people. And the response of so many other people in the media was, well, they shouldn't have provoked them, maybe they shouldn't have pushed them. Isn't the whole idea of free speech that you should be able to say whatever you want to without getting your head blown off for it?
Absolutely. I thought the way the mainstream media laid down on that was a disgrace. It was a very cowardly act because, you know, we fought so hard for free speech, and freedom's not free. You pay a price for everything, and the price you pay to live in a free society is toleration. You got to tolerate things that you don't necessarily like so you can be free. And freedom of speech is not freedom for the thought you love, it's a freedom for the thought you hate the most. When you can stand on the dais beside someone and disagree with everything they say that makes your blood boil, then, you know, you've earned your right to say that you're for free speech.
When you do some of the provocative things you've done in your career, was that a big calculation of them? Was it an intentional strategy on your part to push back the boundaries of what's allowable? Because if they start to encroach, it never really ends, right?
Once you capitulate, yeah, it's over. You know, you have to push back. You know, you know that repressive forces tend to take over when you allow it to happen, when the people allow it to happen. we've got to be careful about these walls of decency we build around us, because pretty soon they find out that we're in a prison. You know.
That's exactly right. That's well said. Now, we've talked about the assault on free speech from this extremely intolerant Islamic jihadi movement around the world. But I think much more pernicious here in America is this perpetual, ongoing, politically correct assault on speech, where if I disagree with what you're saying, I'm going to call you a Nazi, or I'm going to call you a fascist, I'm going to call you whatever I want to, so that I don't have to argue with you, I don't have to have the conversation. And political correctness is now at the point where very liberal comedians like Chris Rock and so on say they won't go on college campuses anymore, they just won't perform on college campuses, because he's going to make some kind of a joke about something and they're never going to hear the end of it.
See, what people tend to forget, that free speech is only important if it's offensive. If it's not offensive, it don't need protection of the First Amendment.
Correct.
So that's where the clash comes. When you offend somebody with your position or your rhetoric, they try to label it hate speech or this kind of speech or that kind of speech. But it all boils down to censorship.
What do you think about this politically correct censorship in the name of gentleness and lack of offending anybody? My position is you don't have a right not to be offended in America.
Well,
no one has that right.
Yeah, I personally don't call people derogatory names because I think you've lost half the battle there. But at the same time, I don't feel that you suppress speech just because you don't like what somebody's saying. You're going to always have isolated groups around that are advocating various types of censorship. And as long as you don't allow them to institute their censorship and they want to talk a lot, just let them talk.
The best antidote to speech that's offensive is to mock it, isn't it? Is to make fun of it rather than to legally shut it up or force it to be quiet. You mock it, you make fun of it. The most famous thing you did with Hustler was the Jerry Falwell thing, where you basically just mocked him and went to trial on it. And you weren't saying that he doesn't have a right to say what he can say. You were saying that what he is saying is loathsome, and here's why.
Yeah, it's that was always our biggest fights was with the religious right, because I was being blamed for every ill that society embodied, and I only came on the scene in the 70s, you know. So I got to know Reverend Falwell very well after the case was over, after almost 5 long years of fighting. We actually became friends.
Isn't that funny?
My mother always told me, said, no matter how much you just like someone, if you get to know them, you'll always find out that they have qualities that you admire.
That's remarkable.
And that happened to be very true, you know, in the Reverend's case, but that didn't mean he was right on the issue.
No, it doesn't. You got to be friends with Jerry Falwell. That's really, really quite remarkable. Let me see. You mentioned recently to Larry King that there's obviously a big thing going on with the so-called war on women, and that women make 78 cents on the dollar for what men are paid. A lot of people respond by saying that men work longer hours, and that's just a national average. But you admitted, I think, that you were actually paying women a little less than you were paying your men, and you said you didn't really know what to do about it. Is that something you've given some thought to?
It's hard to fix because of the culture. You see, a lot of things has to do with the title and the category. The particular person shares in the company, because some people the title means more money, other people responsibility means more money. So then when the gender question comes into play, sometimes it's hard to level that playing field. Now, I agree that it should be done. I don't know whether the government should have a role in that or who should have a role in that, but I think a woman doing the same work that a man does, she deserves the same pay. Well, what do you do in a situation where the man's really doing more pay and it's more important to the company, even though they both might have the same title?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Got another issue there.
Well, while we're talking about kind of the things I think we can agree on from I call myself a conservatarian, really. I think people should just be left alone. I'm a big believer in freedom and being left alone. So let's talk about two gay rights issues. Gay marriage has just passed the Supreme Court. It's basically the law of the land now. You're a big supporter of gay marriage rights.
I'm supportive of gay rights because I understand the issue, and that is that I think science has already established that it's in the genes. Mm-hmm. You don't become gay, you're born gay.
I agree.
So we can't really discriminate against these people.
No, I agree with that completely. But let me ask you about two cases that I think are interesting, on this point, because I'm in full agreement. I don't think the government has any right to tell you you can be married or can't be married. I don't think they've got any business in that. Let me ask you about this. What do you think about a Christian bakery? Turns out they didn't actually say this, but let's just say they decided they didn't want to make a cake for a gay person's wedding. Do they have a right to do that, in your opinion? Do they have a right to say, no, I don't want to do that?
I do. I think that they have a right to, if it goes against their core beliefs to not produce that cake, I think they have a right not to do it.
I agree.
But now, if you take that over to the Hobby Lobby case, where they would discriminate against people who had the right to have birth control as a part of their insurance coverage, and then they discriminate on that basis, that's wrong.
Does Hobby Lobby have a right to set its own personal corporate policies as they see fit, or do you think that's
yeah, they can set corporate policies, but they can't be discriminatory. You know, they can't hire a woman and then she's told, when she becomes eligible for benefits, that she can't have the benefits because it goes against the moral beliefs of people that own the company. I think that's a big stretch.
Okay. Let me ask you another question about this. As I said, I don't think the government has the right to tell anybody whether they get married or not. So in my opinion, if a congregation wants to marry two men and the congregation agrees, that's their business. And if they don't want to marry two men because of their religious belief, that's their business too. Do you think that either the government or activists have the right to tell a congregation that they must now abide by the law and marry two people, even if it's against their religious beliefs?
No, I do not. You cannot ask somebody to participate in something that they think is abhorrent to their being, to their thoughts.
Well, so far we're on the exact same page. Let's talk about a little bit of politics here. You've been a big supporter of Hillary Clinton and endorsing her pretty strongly. How do you feel about her as a candidate? Does this email scandal bother you at all?
It's my surprise. I don't particularly like Hillary. I think
we do have a lot in common.
I think she's more of a hawk than Bill was. I don't think she's near the politician she is. My main concern is, for the last 50 years, we've had a court leaning to the right. I really don't believe the country's to the right, neither do I believe they're to the left. I believe the country's somewhere in the center. And the next president is going to have an opportunity to appoint maybe two, maybe three Supreme Court justices. The balance of that court could be changed for the next 20 years. You could see a lot of 6-2 decisions coming out the wrong way.
Right now, it's pretty much even. It's pretty much 4 to 5 decisions, and Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, switched twice to support Obamacare. Seems reasonably balanced.
Well, I think that Citizens United done more damage than everything else they screwed up.
Really? Why is that? I mean, you run a very large business, and you have more than just about any other CEO in the country. You personally are associated with your business. I mean, many people, there's hundreds of buildings around here. The CEO and the company are not particularly well attached by name, but Larry Flynt Publications is Larry Flynt Publications. So you're saying that you don't think that organizations or groups should have the right to have that kind of political influence?
You cannot have it without total transparency, because you could have the greatest candidate in the world, a messiah out there, and if you have Citizens United coming in with hundreds of millions of dollars, they can swamp that individual in election, and you don't even know where the money's coming from. You don't know what special interest people are looking for, what favors. That was just a bad ruling all the way around.
Would you apply that same standard to George Soros, the numbers of large nonprofits and things that he set up on the left?
The Democrats has got Siren Soros, 2 billionaires. The Republicans got hundreds of billionaires.
Oh, I don't know if that's true, but we'll see. I mean, all the big money seems to be on the Democratic side. Steven Spielberg, all of these, Oprah, all these gigantic magnates are out there. You have the Koch brothers, they're sort of on their little island out there, aren't they?
Oh, I didn't agree. You find that there's a lot more donor money available on the Republican side than on the Democratic side.
Well, let's just put that aside for a second and go to a solution, because we can agree that there's large money. Certainly, people with more money are throwing more influence than people who don't have any money.
Well,
what would be a good solution?
Well, I want to get back to one point first on Hillary. The reason why I like to see her elected is she's going to appoint more moderates to the court than a Republican would. That's the only reason that I'm endorsing her. Getting back to what could be done on elections, I think we should do it a lot the way Australia does it. They have like about an 84% turnout. If you don't vote, you can actually get fined.
Yeah, I was in Australia for an election.
And I think, and you don't see a lot of money going into the political system down there. So there's a way you can clean it up. But it's so difficult because you've got politicians that don't want to clean it up because that's their way of staying in office.
So I often agree with much of this. It seems so often in America today, it really is inside the Beltway versus the rest of the country, that inside the Beltway, it's just a huge tornado of money and influence and power. And it's both sides are using enormous connections to corporate funds and to pension funds with unions, and the individual voter out here in the rest of the country outside the Beltway is put at a pretty big disadvantage.
They get screwed. They really do.
Get screwed.
I mean, we need political reform. We need it bad. We need banking reform. We need it bad. There are some reforms that we need, that if we don't get, this country's going to cease to be what it is, one of the greatest nations in the world. Because you can't continue like this with a broken political system or a broken financial system. You just can't do it.
Well, a year ago, long before this interview was ever on the table, I saw something about a year ago that made me think of you quite clearly, and that was it was in the wake of the Benghazi thing. I'm not going to drag the Benghazi internals of it into that, but as that attack was going on, the entire command structure knew that it was an Al-Qaeda attack, and yet they blamed the uprising in Benghazi on a film that was made by some poor schmuck, Nabula, I think his name was, who 6 months ago made a movie about Muhammad, put it on YouTube. They blamed the entire uprising on this guy's film, and he did a year in a dungeon for having made a movie that nobody saw.
Wow. politicians are always trying to deflect blame. I don't think Hillary or anybody associated with government would have done anything that would have caused those 4 people to lose their lives. But I do think that there were some people asleep at the wheel, and they should have identified it for what it was. I never believed the story about the tape anyway.
But the film, about the filmmaker?
Yeah, because politicians will grab at straws that don't exist to try to connect the dots. But
did you feel any sympathy for that man? The reason I thought about you so clearly when it came up was, it sounded so much to me like a person who was being railroaded into this sort of scapegoat for the entire sins of everything. And all this guy did was exercise his First Amendment rights to make a movie. I mean, I was appalled at this.
I feel the very same way. I feel the very same way. Nothing was handled right on Benghazi, and there may have been some negligence there, but I don't think there was any wrongdoing.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Republicans for a minute. Obviously, Donald Trump is just running away with this as we tape this anyway. I don't particularly have a particularly high opinion of Donald Trump. I don't think he's a conservative. I think he's a Trumpian. I think he's interested in Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, and you and Donald Trump have a few things in common, and primarily among them is Donald Trump is speaking his mind without holding anything back, and I think in this politically correct age, that's what's driving his numbers. His record as a conservative or Republican is he's donated money to Hillary Clinton. He's not exactly the ideological choice, but he's courageously and openly saying what's on his mind, and millions of people are connecting to that.
Donald Trump's got a better chance of getting elected president than I have. Now, he has got the Jerry Springer show all locked up. Those people that watched it over the years, they'll vote for Donald Trump. But when you take his 25% that he's leading in the polls, and when you do the math on it, you'll find out that's 10% of the Republican primary, because the rest of the vote goes to the other 16 other people. So Trump's only leading a primary field 10 points. And he'll fare even worse in the general election.
I kind of think so.
The polls that they run show that Bernie Sanders could beat him. I love Bernie, but I'd never vote for him. You know?
Why not?
Huh?
Why not?
Well,
90% tax rate for one?
You know, socialism works fine till you run out of other people's money.
What happens if these email investigations cause enough traction for Hillary Clinton to drop out of the race? Let's just assume. What would you do then? Do you have a favorite?
Biden will get beat in. Biden will be probably the guy who runs, and the Republicans will beat him badly. Because Joe's run 2 times previously and never got more than 1% of the vote.
Who would you vote for if Hillary drops out?
Huh?
If Hillary does drop out, just a hypothetical, who would you vote for?
I would vote for Biden, but I don't think he will win. Now, you got to understand, I'm sure that Bill and Hillary have had a lot of pillow talk. And if there was anything in those 60,000 emails that was really incriminating, involving top secret emails, she wouldn't be in the race. He's a smart enough politician to get her out of it.
Don't you think, my position on this would be that don't you think that the media has thrown such a cloak of invisibility over Hillary and Barack Obama for so long that she just thought she could get away with it? The FBI has found either 300 or 600, and they've only been through 20% of the emails, that 600 emails that contain classified information.
No, they didn't say that.
What did they say?
They said that they potentially contain, and they've turned them over to the Justice Department, they potentially contain classified information. But there's a big question on whether if those emails were marked confidential when she received them or not, if she had permission to hold them or not. That's going to be what this whole thing is going to hinge on.
Last thing I'll say about the email thing is I read the statute very carefully, and the statute in question says that it's failure to turn them in. It doesn't say classified, it says failure to turn in the records. So in terms of what the statute actually says, I don't think there's any question that she's in violation of that. Do you think that, to some people that appears like she's above the law? Do you feel that way?
No, you've never heard anybody say, except a couple of nutcases, say that Hillary's in violation of law. They say she's in violation of policy, or that's not the way it's supposed to do. But, you know, violating a policy or rule is not like breaking a law. There's a big difference in that. So she could have got a little sloppy, and people are not going to be appreciative of that, but I don't think it's going to be near as damaged as if they find something incriminating.
I just looked it up. It's U.S. Code Title 18, Part 1, Chapter 101, Section 2071, Paragraph A. It's a federal regulation, but we'll get off of that for a second. What is it about the Republican field in general that you don't like? I mean, if the entire 16 slate of candidates is basically just off the table for you, Hillary or no Hillary, what is it about Republicans that just basically takes it off the table for you?
Every one of them. Trump just done it for show, but all the rest of them is to the right of Attila the Hun, you know. They just really amaze me at their immigration position and their position on they're taking on voting rights, even on abortion. They're taking that to extreme. I think they've already lost the minority vote, and I think that they're not going to get the women's vote as well. So I think the Democrat could still get 48% of the vote and win.
Are you an open borders advocate?
No, but I think we need to perfect our legal immigration system.
Guest worker program or something sensible like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely in favor of that too.
But you don't see anybody moving towards that.
Generally.
Anybody can mention immigration before they get a chance to explain what they want to do. They've already been blackballed by their party, you know.
Well, blackballed by somebody anyway. I'd like to move on to something here that I think. Oh, by the way, I just have to ask this. You know, Megyn Kelly got in so much trouble for asking a tough question of Donald Trump. I think it's her job to ask tough questions. I wish the media would ask tough questions of everybody. They certainly don't seem to.
I like Megyn. I think she does a good job, but she's also very condescending and very judgmental. You see it in her face and her attitude. So she can get under your skin really easy. Of course, guys like Mike Wallace could do the same thing.
Yeah, that definitely.
She's probably the closest thing to a female Mike Wallace we've had. So I imagine that this is not the last we're going to be able to hear about her endeavors.
Well, I hope you don't mind me asking about something obviously very personal, but obviously you're a victim of an assassination attempt several decades ago, and I was wondering if you had an opinion on gun control or anything along those lines. Is that something you have a particular opinion about?
I'm very much interested in gun control, but I'm also opposed to the death penalty.
Really? The person who shot you was a serial killer lunatic. He killed 3 people before he took a shot at you, probably killed another 7 or 8 after he took a shot at you, and he was executed back in 2013. You were sorry to see that happen?
No, I asked them not to execute him because they even filed a brief with the ACLU. I don't think the government should be in the business of killing. I think life imprisonment is much more punishment than the death penalty anyway.
Do you think that stricter gun controls might have stopped him in his attempt on your life?
Pardon?
I said, do you think that stricter gun control laws might have stopped him in his attempt on your life?
Oh, I don't put much faith in gun control laws because people want to find a gun. There's more guns in this country than there are people. You know, if they get their hands on a gun, maybe there'd be a few less murders by guns if you have better gun registration.
He was a previous felon before he ever encountered you. Needless to say, felons aren't allowed to own guns. He did it all illegally. A lot of people would say that strict gun control laws only affect the people that are honest gun owners who want to use them for self-defense. Do you think there's a self-defense case to be made for gun ownership?
Well, I don't oppose the Second Amendment for the purpose of self-defense. But when you look at some of these militias that have got everything but a tank or a bazooka in their yard.
Some of them have tanks and bazookas too. I've seen them.
Yeah. I don't think that's what the Founding Fathers meant. They were meant to be part of the militia to protect their farms and towns and the states, you know, in those early years. And I think all that made a lot of sense, but I think the Founding Fathers would be waking up to a nightmare if they seen the country now.
No. Can I come back to Donald Trump just for a minute? I'd just like to know what you think about him personally. Put aside his chances of winning and the whole electoral gaming thing. He's an entrepreneur. He's a showman, and he's very outspoken. Those seem to be three qualities that you have. Do you feel any?
Well, yeah, but I don't lie like he does. You know, I mean, you take whatever Donald said and divide by 3, and you might come up with the answer. Especially when he's talking about his net worth and what he's done and what he's accomplished. He's always got to talk about where he went to school and how rich he is, and I don't know. Maybe there's some average folks out there that want to hear that stuff. I don't really want to hear it, you know. I happen to know Donald. I mean, his ego wouldn't fit in this building.
No, and it's a big building. Let's just close perhaps by talking a little bit about your magazine and your publishing empire and the future of that. Print is going away pretty quickly, and obviously for a person who's made a great impression and got a fair amount of money in pornography, the internet has changed that game completely. Do you see a future not only for your magazine in print, but for any magazine in print, or do you think the clock is really ticking on print media?
No, the internet's put an end to that. We're still publishing because we're profitable, but that's less than 5% of our business. We're in a gaming and retail business now. And we do a lot of licensing and foreign business as well. And one of my largest internet, or one of my largest income streams is broadcast television. We go into 67 different countries, and I'm one of the largest programmers of it, the largest of it, programmers in the world.
Hustler just celebrated its 40th anniversary, and it has made an impression on American culture. Everybody from me and a lot of guys who are overseas right now, right at this very second, in forward bases in Afghanistan and everywhere else. You've touched a lot of lives.
I've helped a lot of guys make it through puberty.
Yeah, we're going to probably have to censor my reaction out to that. The thing I'd like to ask you, though, is do you think that somebody... We hear from great entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and even the guys from Google and Elon Musk, a lot of people have said that they don't think that they could have done what they did in the America of today because of regulations, tax rates, just the difficulty in getting started. I was born in '59. I can remember the 50s and 60s and 70s, and everything was just so much simpler. Do you think that you could do what you did today in some other field even, perhaps? Or do you think that we missed a golden age there?
Well, I don't know. I've always been a driven person because I would have probably been successful regardless of what kind of business I was in, but some regulations are necessary, but we've really gone overboard. And the problem is, if you've got people regulating the businesses, you know absolutely nothing about them. That's one thing. That's one thing that Trump's right about.
This would be my final question for you. If you could look back on your career and your impact on society, what would be the thing you're most proud of, and is there anything that you're not proud of?
I would say I've fought harder than anyone I know to expand the parameters of free speech in what I think is a good way. Unfortunately, I've been a lousy husband, a lousy father. 5 marriages is nothing to brag about, but I was on the move, and success was more important than the stability of my families, and I think that was probably the most terrible mistake I made.
Do you think that society is more sexually open and more just genuinely easier place, a more pleasant place to live as a result of your magazine and the work you've done?
I think so, because hustlers desensitized America in many ways, and that's what it needed. Because we don't have that knee-jerk attitude so much that we used to have about sex. The Europeans are much more laid back about sex than Americans are. They don't. Everybody seems to have a mistress over there. But I think it's been helpful in a sense that one of our greatest gifts, we've been told for so many centuries to be taboo and repressed, and I think now people realize that sex was meant to be enjoyed.
I think I'll wrap by where I started. This office, as I said, is so classical and romantic and very soft in a lot of ways. And your reputation from people who don't know you or never get a chance to get close enough to see you is that you're rather this hard-edged, kind of rapacious, kind of, like you said, a guy printing pornography in a basement someplace. How does it feel to be that misunderstood? I mean, you want to talk about slings and arrows. You've taken more than your share. In fact, I suspect you've probably taken more slings and arrows than anybody I've ever met. Is that hard to deal with sometimes?
That's a great question, because the people whose lives I've touched admire me, you know. People who are opposed to me for what I do or what I represent to them in their mind, obviously they're not very fond of me. So it's really a mixed bag. But the circles that I run in, I have a lot of friends and amazing acquaintances, and I live a good life.
I would imagine that getting to be friends with Jerry Falwell after all of that open warfare must have been pretty vindicating for both of you.
He walked through that door over there and he said, "I surrender." He said, "I know when I'm beaten."
Well, I know when I'm beaten too, Mr. Flynt. It's a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you.